PCAB 9, File ID 5173, a resolution of the Miami Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board recommending approval or denial to the Miami City Commission of an ordinance amending ordinance number 13114, the zoning ordinance of the City of Miami. More specifically, by amending Article 1, Section 1.1, entitled Definitions of Building Function Uses, Article 4, Table 3, to add the definition of amusement ride by amending Article 4, Table 3, entitled Building Function Uses, to add amusement ride as a use allowed by exception with City Commission approval within the CS Civic Space Transit Zone, and by amending Article 6, Table 13, entitled Supplemental Regulations, to add supplemental regulations for amusement ride in the CS Civic Space Transit Zone.
Hello, Sutra, Chief of Comprehensive Planning for the City of Miami. We're changing locations for this. So I'm just going to run through with you the points of this text amendment to the Miami 21 legislation that is before you this evening. What we've done is worked on an amendment to the zoning code that we've done because of a desire from a leaseholder with at the Bayside Marketplace for additional improvements and programming there. In fact, it's a Ferris wheel that is intended to be put in place there. When the city reviewed the regulations, it became clear there was no anticipation for some kind of amusements in the city. And so to account for this, the amendments that are before you tonight were put together. And so what these amendments do is they amend Article 1, definitions. And they apply a definition for what we are doing, these amusements. Then they make amendments to Article 4, the standards. This kind of thing now can be done, but through exception at City Commission. So these kinds of things, as they're proposed to be brought forward to the city, will be carefully examined through a public process. And then finally, amendments to Article 6, supplemental regulations, which provide for responsible locations. These can only be done in regional destinations in the CS Transect. They have to be done in proper locations, particular configurations. There have to be master planned facilities. There's careful consideration about how these facilities are lit. With their specifications for the light, candles, height, spillover effects, and the like. That's the legislation in a nutshell. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Oh, yes, Ms. Flores.
My first question is, would be a citywide, so any location in the city could apply for this exception.
Any applicant could apply for
Any
this.
applicant.
Absolutely.
And what zoning is it allowed in?
CS,
Which civic?
civic space, but it's more particular than that because it would have to be a regional, it couldn't be a pocket park, for example, it would have to be regional.
Something major, something big.
Yep.
What's the city's, in your view, worst case scenario use of this if we make this change?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Basically, we do this, we change it, what you guys contemplated us to go.
Well, I think we anticipated bad scenarios, and to try to mitigate against that, we then said this has to go before City Commission to be approved.
Because there was nothing actually in the language so all sorts of things could have happened that's caught it in the exception process for a reason. So,
Right, I mean, is there some aversion to a Ferris wheel? Well, take it to city commission and let the people speak.
thanks.
Yep.
Is there, otherwise,
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak on this item?
Good evening. My name is Wayne Pathman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the board, and staff. I represent Bayside LLC. I represent Ashkenazi, which is the principal leaseholder, and I also represent Skyview America. And what we're trying to do is really quite simple. You're all familiar with Eye in the Sky in London. We're building something 60% less in terms of size, and we want to put it at Bayside. So we're actually seeking a downzoning from T68 to the CS to allow this purpose. We agree with staff that it's very limited, that the commission will have the view in the future of deciding whether any other types of amusements go in any CS area. And CS, if you look at your zoning maps, very limited. There's very few CS spaces throughout the city. So there was nothing in the code that addressed the ability to put something like this in the city. Cities around the world, and especially major metropolitan areas like Miami, have these types of, not really Ferris wheels, but what we call skywheel. And the only place that we thought would be the best location is at Bayside. It also, bottom line, helps the city because it's going to drive revenue, which the city participates in. We're just the lessee. The city owns the property. We've done a lot of community outreach and have a lot of support. We think it's a great project, but unfortunately, without changing the code, we would not be able to go forward with this project. But again, it's extremely limited in terms of where it could go, something like this. And future amusements, it's not like you're going to see a proliferation of amusements throughout the city. And that's the reason why Francisco Garcia, our planning director, said, let's put it in CS because it is so limited. And we are in T68 at Bayside. So we're actually accepting a downzoning in order to be able to put this skywheel at this location. I'm happy to answer any questions. I even have some photographs or pictures if you'd like to see what we're proposing. But it's really a zoning code ordinance issue. So what will happen next is if you approve this tonight, they'll be coming back for a zoning change, also sponsored by the planning department and the manager's office, and ultimately we will seek the exception before the commission.
When you say Bayside, that's in Bayfront Park?
Well, where Bayside is in...
Hold on.
Yes.
Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak? Closing the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, just the question.
So Bayfront Park is a part of, the entire area is considered Bayfront Park, and then you have Bicentennial Park, which is not going to be Mayor Maurice Frey's Park. We are the commercial area within the Bayfront Park called Bayside, which has been there and established originally by the Rouse Company about 35 to 38 years ago.
And you have a definition that you want to incorporate?
Pardon me?
Is the definition? The definition of amusement right. You have that right?
We currently, there's nothing under the code that permits this use. That's why the requested change.
Incorporate that definition?
To incorporate that definition. I mean, that was what, again, this is not our motion or our request. This is a request from the manager's office of the planning department to do this, to allow this use in the city, because there's nothing in the code that permits these types of uses. But it's very limiting.
It seems like you have experience already there, and you probably have experience of history with the Neighborhood Alliance,
Yes.
Downtown Neighborhood Alliance.
Yes, we've met with them, and we've met with...
You did meet with them?
Yes.
And they,
You can...
and they are supporting it.
Pardon me? They are? Yes. Pam Muller's here, who's the general manager of Bayside. She's met with them, and they're very supportive. We'd like to hear from her. I believe we even have a letter of support.
I actually am friendly with Mark
Pam, just
Lavani.
introduce yourself for your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pamela Weller, Bayside Marketplace for 1 Biscayne Boulevard. I've been working with the DNA, and they are a proponent of it, and they also sent a letter to Commissioner Russell from our meeting, and actually we have a meeting tomorrow night with her and the board.
The letter is supporting,
Yes.
from DNA is
Yes.
supporting it.
Yes. We've had no opposition in our community outreach or from talking to the commissioners or staff, and that's why we're asked this, the city is moving forward on their own initiative to allow this use.
My question is, how far is that from the new skyrise tower? And do you have support from that developer?
Well, Skyrise is actually a tenant of ours under the lease. They are immediately to the north, and we are roughly, I don't know, Pam, would you say maybe 500 feet from where they are? Our, obviously, proposal for this Sky Wheel is much, much smaller. Again, it's less than half the size of the one in London.
But do the buyers or prospective buyers of skyrise know that you want to put a Ferris wheel in front of their building? Do you think that would affect later on?
They are aware of our pursuit of this. Again, they're lessees of our tenancy.
The developer, but I mean the buyers, are they aware that they're buying a unit that will be next to a Ferris wheel?
When you say a unit, Skyrise is actually an observation tower with additional amusements.
They're also going to have a condo on the big side.
No,
Not at all.
there's no residential component as far as I'm aware to Skyrise. It's all commercial related observation towers, and they are going to have on the Skyrise project 5 or 6 of their own amusements that they're proposing. There is no residential component.
Thank you.
I do have a question for the city, because I have no problems with what you're trying to do there at Bayside. It's fine with me, but this is a city-wide ordinance, so is there, what other CS spaces are there where it might be less than 500 feet from a residential zone, or what, like, where else would it be affected? Because I think maybe having some sort of buffer between some residential might not be valid, like a T3 or a T4, something that might be lower intensity.
Just confirming here.
I don't have a problem with being Bayside, but this is.
It almost has to be a Bayside type space to permit this, and of course, I don't think the commission would ever allow something that impacts the residential neighborhood. You know, we're, to the east, we're on the water, you know, and then on Bayside, Bayfront Park buffers the whole entire thing.
No, and I agree with that location, but we were talking about earlier worst case scenarios and situations, so I just want to make sure.
Well, that's why you have the checks and balances of the commission.
If I may, so the thing is that this, again, we have to be mindful of the fact that this is only allowed in a regional space, right? And so that's one thing that's also, you know, going to be a mitigating factor in this.
Where does it say it's only regional space? Because I just see CS.
So this is, these particularities are spelled out in Article 6, which are in the supplemental regulations.
So what's
Under
considered,
regional activity complex.
what's considered a regional space?
Guys, let's see.
It's a regional activity complex, it's
Hold on.
not, I'm sorry.
Hold on, I was getting late. Mr. Vice Chair, are you finished?
Yeah, that was my only question, to see where else it could be if it's a body.
All right, Mr. Pena.
What's considered a regional space?
It's, so I misspoke. It's a regional activity complex. It's the kind of, so to sort of use dictionary terms, it has a large draw, so it's a space that's like your Bayside Marketplace.
Yeah, the place where it's the complexes, there's activity, you know, there's.
Yes.
So at the bottom line, there's no other zoning classification where a Ferris wheel could go.
Correct.
Industrial,
Nope.
would it be prohibited or is just silent?
CS is the only transect that allows this. So I don't know if you're familiar, so you know how like in Article 4, table, 3, it tells you where you're allowed to do this? There's only one little cell in there that allows it, and it says E. It's in your legislation here, you can see it quite plainly. It's in CS, where it says amusement ride. And it's blank elsewhere, so that's prohibited in all other transects.
I just saw it.
Is our bayfront out here that's being redeveloped, is that CS?
I'd have to pull up my, I don't know,
My
it's not
concern
top
as
of
I'm
mind.
listening to this is picturing our bayfront here, that's about to be redeveloped,
Yes.
turning into Atlantic City Boulevard.
So again, what I have to just remind you of is the protection that's afforded to the residents of Miami through the exception process, and the fact that that's heard out through the public hearing process. Yep.
Mr. Gersten, ready for a motion?
I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Okay,
You said that the DNA is in support of it.
Excuse me,
The
I'm
rules
sorry,
are-
is the attorney here?
He's stepped away.
I'm sorry, but I just have an issue because aren't you on that board or the president of that board or something like that?
No, no,
DNA
no, no.
associated.
It's a different association.
what's the DNA? Clear to work out.
DNA is Biscayne Neighborhood Association.
Is the what,
And
sorry?
Biscayne Neighborhood Association, and it's removed from the footprint of DNA. So you have a letter from DNA?
DNA.
Downtown Neighbors Alliance?
Yeah.
You have a letter
Yes.
supporting this,
Yes.
even without them, reading even once the definition, the actual definition of, amusement, right?
We're not on trial here, guys. They're representing, they have a letter.
We've had a major outreach with the community and the city. We haven't had any negative feedback at all. This is not an obtrusive type structure. It's see-through, it doesn't have flashing lights, it makes no noise at all.
Okay.
We've had a lot of support for it.
We got it. I don't want to hear it again. Mr. Gersten,
Make a motion to approve.
so is there a second to approve? Not a second.
I'll make a motion to second.
All right, so the vice chair, seconds. Mr. Gersten's motion to approve. Call the roll.
Mr. Gersten?
Yes.
Mr. Milian? Mr. Octavi?
No?
Mr. Dominguez? Mr. Parrish? Mr. Pina?
Yes.
Ms. Torrance?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
No.
Mr. Garavadia?
No?
Motion fails 4-5.
Next item, please.